Tonight, there is nowhere you need to be except beside a quiet lake where lanterns are still kept lit along the shore, and the water remembers more stars than the sky above it can hold at once. If you would like to, let your breathing slow a little now. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your hands grow still. And as the day slips softly away, imagine that you have come at dusk to a narrow road leading down through reeds and silver grass toward a lakeside village called Moonmere, where evening gathers gently and every light seems to have been lit with care. The road curves between low stone walls and wind-bent trees. Beyond them, the first lanterns are already appearing. Not bright, not hurried, only warm points of amber among the deepening blue. Moonmere lies at the edge of a broad, still lake, almost hidden by reeds, willow branches, and the low drifting mist that rises there each evening once the air begins to cool. The village is small enough that no one seems to speak loudly in it. Roofs slope toward narrow lanes, wooden footbridges cross shallow inlets, tiny gardens lean toward the water, and everywhere, in doorways and at the ends of short piers, lanterns wait to be lit or have only just begun to glow. You arrive just as the last clear line of sunset is fading behind the far trees. The sky above the lake is a dim, washed silver blue. The water below it reflects that same color, but softer, as if evening had come there first. You pause at the crest of the path and look down. There is something in the arrangement of the village that feels immediately restful, not because it is grand or distant, but because it is orderly in a quiet way. Paths lead where they should. Lamps appear where darkness gathers. Boats are tied carefully to their posts. Doors close with soft sounds. Smoke rises straight from a few chimneys into the cooling air. Farther along the shore, at the edge of a little point of land, stands a small lantern house. It is not a lighthouse in any dramatic sense. It is lower, gentler, meant not for ocean storms but for mist, shallow channels, and travelers returning slowly across the lake after dark. Its stone base is round, its upper windows narrow, and just outside it, a wooden walkway extends over the water, lined on both sides with short iron posts from which lanterns hang at measured intervals. This is where the lantern keeper lives and works. You have heard of him before, though only in the way people mention those who belong perfectly to a place. The baker who is always opened before dawn. The ferryman who knows the lake by sound in fog. The woman who keeps the herb garden behind the chapel. The lantern keeper of Moonmere is spoken of in that same way, as though he has become part of the evening itself. The path takes you lower, past a row of cottages with shuttered windows and climbing ivy now gone dark in the fading light. Outside one door, a basket of rushes has been left to dry. Outside another, a pair of small boots waits neatly side by side on the step. Somewhere, a kettle lid shifts softly. Somewhere else, a chair is drawn across a floor. These sounds do not disturb the quiet. They complete it. At the bottom of the lane stands a small square open to the water. A stone well sits in the center, its rim worn smooth by years of use. 2 willow trees lean over the edge of the square like patient listeners. Beyond them, the lake begins, darkening by degrees. An old woman in a gray shawl is lighting a lantern outside a shop with blue-painted shutters. She shields the flame with one hand until it settles, then hangs the lantern on its hook above the door. When she turns and sees you, she gives a small nod. "If you're looking for the keeper," she says, "follow the lights." It seems the kind of direction one is meant to receive at Moonmere. You thank her and continue on. The shore path is made of old boards in some places, smooth stones in others. It curves between reeds and mooring posts, never far from the water. Along the way, small lanterns have already been lit, their reflections stretching in narrow, wavering lines across the lake. The effect is simple and beautiful. It makes the whole shoreline appear gently stitched to the evening by threads of gold. The mist is beginning to gather now, not thick enough to hide anything, only enough to soften edges. A rowboat becomes a shape inside a pale veil. A pier becomes a darker line on silver water. A cluster of reeds becomes something almost painted rather than seen. It is easy to understand why lanterns matter here. Without them, the village would still be lovely. With them, it feels guided. As you walk, the air changes. The warmth of the day goes. The scent of water rises. You can smell wet wood, reeds, faint chimney smoke, and the clean mineral coolness that comes only from lakes after sunset. At last, you reach the lantern house. Its door stands half open. Light spills across the boards of the little walkway and into the mist beyond. Inside is a room at once practical and deeply comforting. Shelves hold oil tins, spare glass chimneys, coils of wick, and polishing cloths folded with exact care. Hooks on the wall carry weather capes and lantern frames waiting to be repaired. A broad wooden table stands near the center of the room with 3 lanterns upon it, each at a different stage of being cleaned and prepared. Beside them rests a ledger open to neat evening notes written in dark ink. The keeper is there, trimming a wick with a small pair of brass scissors. He looks up when you enter. He is older than you expected, though not old in a frail sense. His hair is silver at the temples. His coat is thick dark wool. His hands move carefully, as if years of tending flame in wind and mist have taught them never to waste a gesture. His face carries the composure of someone who belongs to habits that have long since become second nature. "Good evening," he says. The room is so calm that even those words seem quieter than usual. You explain that you were told to follow the lights. That seems to amuse him very slightly. "It is good advice on this shore," he says. He gestures toward the chair by the wall. "You may sit if you like. I have 2 more lanterns for the western walk and 1 for the chapel landing. Evening takes a little time here." You sit. The chair's plain but sturdy, and from it you can see both the room and the lake through the narrow windows. The keeper returns to his work. He polishes the glass with a square of linen until it no longer shows the faint breath cloud of the room. He checks the oil, trims the wick, adjusts the frame, and closes the latch with a soft, precise click. Each movement is small and unhurried. Nothing in the sequence suggests performance. It is simply the work as it is done every evening and has likely been done for many years. On the table lies the ledger. Without meaning to pry, you notice the rhythm of its entries. Western walk lit, mist low over north reeds, chapel landing trimmed, ferry chain heard at dusk, 1 lantern glass cracked and replaced. These are not dramatic records. They are small notes about weather, flame, and the condition of the evening. And yet together they feel strangely beautiful, like a diary kept not of events, but of steadiness. When the first lantern is ready, the keeper lifts it and nods toward the door. "Come," he says, "the western boards first." Outside, the evening has deepened almost to night. The mist moves slowly along the shore, silver where it catches lantern light, blue where it dissolves into water, and distance. The keeper walks ahead with practiced ease. You follow him along the wooden walkway while the lake breathes gently against the posts below. At each iron hook he pauses, removes the lantern there, checks the flame, cleans the rim if needed, and either relights or replaces it. The work is repetitive in the most restful possible way. Lift, check, trim, hang. A brief golden flare, then stillness again. The farther end of the western walk reaches a place where the village gives way to reeds and open shore. From there, Moonmere looks especially quiet. Cottage lights glow behind willow branches. A single upstairs window burns over the square. The shop lantern by the blue shutters remains steady, and the path you followed shines now in scattered points along the water's edge. Does the mist trouble travelers often, you ask? The keeper looks out across the water before answering. Not if they trust the shore, he says. Only if they look too far into the dark and forget that the next light is already there. It feels like something said often, but never carelessly. The second lantern goes a little farther on, near a half-hidden landing where a narrow boat is tied among reeds. The keeper kneels to shield the flame from the lake breeze while he fastens the latch. For a moment his lantern, the hanging lantern, and their reflections all shine together in the dark water below, making 3 small circles of gold that drift softly with each ripple. Then the breeze settles. The reflections lengthen. The keeper stands. You walk back more slowly. Night has almost fully arrived now, though Moonmere never seems truly dark. Wherever shadow gathers, some small warm light answers it. A door lantern, a pier lantern, a kitchen window, the tiny chapel lamp at the far end of the inlet, even the stars, beginning to appear between moving strips of cloud, seem less like distant things than another lanterning of the world above. When you return to the lantern house, the keeper sets the last prepared lantern on the table and pours tea from a blue enamel pot waiting on the stove. Mint and black tea, he says. The lake air turns cool quickly. He hands you a cup. It warms your hands at once. The room now smells faintly of warm metal, lamp oil, tea leaves, and the sweet dry scent of old wood. Outside the window, the western walk glows in its complete sequence of lights. The effect is so orderly that it seems not arranged but inevitable. There is a second chair by the stove. The keeper takes it, and for a little while neither of you speaks. There is no awkwardness in that. The stove hums softly. The cups send up thin, pale ribbons of steam. The lake touches the posts outside with quiet, repetitive sounds. From across the water comes, very faintly, the bell of some boat moving carefully through mist. After a time, your eyes wander to a shelf above the table where several objects have been placed with unusual care. A smooth stone with a white line through it, a brass watch no longer running, a folded letter tied with blue thread, and a tiny lantern no bigger than a hand, polished to a warm, dull glow. The keeper notices your glance. People leave things behind, he says. His tone suggests no sadness, only acceptance. On the shore, sometimes on the ferries, sometimes at the landing, sometimes in the lantern house itself, if they come in out of fog and sit long enough to forget they were carrying anything. He looks toward the little lantern on the shelf. I keep them until they are claimed, and when they are not claimed, I keep them still. It is a small mystery, and exactly the right size for the room. You need not know whose watch stopped, or who tied the blue thread around the folded letter, or why the small lantern was left there. The not knowing, does not sharpen the mind. It softens it. It lets each object become part of the stillness rather than a problem to be solved. After tea, the keeper rises for the final round. "The chapel landing," he said. "You go with him again, this time along the narrower path that curves behind the willow trees and follows a shallow inlet where the water lies almost motionless beneath mats of reeds. At the end of it stands a little stone chapel, no larger than a cottage, with a bell tower too modest to be called a tower at all. Its single lakeside lantern hangs beside a narrow landing where, in daylight, villagers sometimes tie their boats before walking up to the door. Now the lantern burns low. The keeper opens the frame, trims the wick, and adds a little oil from the flask he carries. The chapel wall holds the day's warmth no longer. The mist presses lightly against the stones. The bell above remains silent. When the flame steadies again, the landing takes shape in the dark water below, and the whole small scene seems complete. On the walk back, you pass a row of houses facing the inlet. Curtains have been drawn. One upstairs window remains lit. A cat sits on a sill, as if keeping its own separate watch over the shore. From somewhere behind a garden wall comes the smell of rosemary and damp earth. Nothing moves quickly. Nothing asks for explanation. By the time you return to the lantern house once more, the moon has risen behind thin cloud. It does not shine sharply. It lays a pale sheen over the mist and gives the lake a quiet silvery depth. Perhaps this is how Moonmere received its name. Or perhaps the name has been there so long that no one remembers another. Inside, the keeper lowers the lamp on the table and closes the ledger for the night. You notice then that a narrow stair curves upward along the wall. "Do you live above the lantern room?" you ask. He nods. A small room, a bed, a stove, 2 shelves, and a window over the east water. It is enough. Again, it sounds like the sort of thing that has become true through repetition. "Do you ever leave the shore at night?" The keeper thinks a moment. "Rarely. The lake sounds different after dark. It prefers to be listened to." The answer feels entirely suited to Moonmere. There is another pause, and then, because the room invites only gentle curiosity, you ask about the folded letter on the shelf. He does not seem surprised. "It was left here 3 winters ago," he says. "A ferryman found it on the table after fog closed the channel. No name on the outside. No one came back for it." "And you never opened it?" He shakes his head. "Some mysteries are made quieter by remaining closed." That, too, seems like good advice on this shore. The night deepens. The stove continues its soft hum. From the lake comes the occasional muted knock of wood against wood where a boat shifts in its mooring. The lamp on the table lowers the room into a smaller and smaller circle of warmth. You begin to feel that Moonmere has a way of thinning thought itself, the way mist thins the line between water and sky. The keeper notices you're growing quiet. "There's a bench outside the east side," he says. "Best place for the late lights." You step out once more, this time around the curved stone wall of the lantern house to a sheltered side where the reeds open and the lake broadens. A bench stands there beneath a bent willow branch. From this angle, the village lies behind you, and before you is only open water, mist, and a slow procession of reflected lanterns from the distant eastern shore. They do not appear all at once. One glows through mist, then another farther off, then a small wavering pair near what must be the ferry crossing. The lake makes room for each reflection and carries it lightly. The moon, veiled behind cloud, turns the upper mist pale. The lower mist remains blue-gray and soft. Reeds whisper whenever a slight breeze passes, then return to stillness. You sit there for a long while. Nothing much changes. That is the comfort of it. The next lantern appears when it is ready. The next ripple reaches shore when it arrives. The next sound from the village comes only occasionally. A late door latch, a distant footstep on boards, a kettle being moved from one place to another. The keeper does not join you immediately. When he does, he brings a wool blanket and lays it over the back of the bench without ceremony. The gesture is so matter-of-fact it feels older than politeness. "Mist will stay a while tonight," he says. You thank him and draw the blanket around your shoulders. It smells faintly of cedar and lake air. Together you watch the shore in companionable silence. Far out on the water, a dim moving light appears and disappears within the mist. "A late skiff?" you ask. "Most likely," the keeper says. They know the route. No worry enters his voice. Trust the shore. Trust the next light. Moonmere seems built on those quiet principles. After a time, the moving light reaches the line of the western lanterns and becomes easier to follow. Then, it passes beyond the reeds and vanishes toward some private dock unseen from here. The keeper does not comment further, nor do you. The fact of its safe passage is enough. The night is now in its deepest middle part, the hour when the village has almost entirely given itself to sleep, the hour when mist settles lower over the water, the hour when lanterns seem less like objects and more like assurances. If thoughts have followed you this far, they need not go farther. Let them rest on the nearest pier. Let them hang on the nearest hook beside a steady flame. Let them drift out over the reeds and become one more softened shape inside the mist. There is no need to solve anything tonight. Not the folded letter, not the stopped watch, not the name of the late traveler who left the tiny lantern on the shelf. It is enough to know that such things can exist gently in the world without demanding an answer. At last, the keeper stands. "One more look at the eastern posts," he says. You walk with him along a narrow boardwalk where the planks are silvered faintly by moisture. The lanterns here are lower and farther apart, set for those who know the shore and need only a little guidance rather than much. At each one he pauses, checks the glass, adjusts the flame if needed, and moves on. The rhythm returns. Lift, check, trim, hang. It is as restful now as it was earlier, perhaps more so because the village is quieter and the mist more complete. At the final post, the keeper lowers his hand and looks across the lake. The opposite shore is almost invisible. Only 2 lanterns float there as though in empty space. "You could lose yourself looking too far out," he says softly. "And yet it doesn't feel lonely." "No," he says, "not lonely. Only wide." The distinction matters. You stand there a moment longer before returning to the house. Inside, the keeper hangs his coat, wipes a trace of mist from the table, and turns the lamp lower again. "You may stay until the east begins to pale," he says. "That is often the quietest hour." So you remain. There is another cup of tea, lighter now, almost gone cool in the pot. There is the small room, the stove, the ledger closed for the night, and the shelf of unclaimed objects glowing gently in the lamplight. You sit once more by the window. Outside, the lantern reflections drift and tremble. The mist thickens, then thins. The lake continues its soft, patient sound against wood and stone. And little by little the night becomes even simpler. The mind has less to hold. The room asks for less attention. The sounds separate into only a few necessary things: the stove, the water, the occasional hush of reeds, and once in a long while the keeper's quiet step as he checks some detail you did not notice. Time loosens. There is no need to follow it. At some point, though you cannot say when, the darkness begins to change, not by brightening all at once, only by easing. The mist beyond the window becomes less blue and more pearl gray. The reflections shorten. The nearest post on the eastern walk separates more clearly from the water below it. Morning is not here, but it has begun thinking about arriving. The keeper opens the ledger once more and adds one final line. You do not lean close enough to read it, and that feels right. The entry belongs to the night that has just passed between the lanterns and the lake. He closes the book, caps the ink, and stands a moment with one hand resting lightly on the table. Soon the baker will light tea.